The year was 1876, when hope and heartbreak rode the same winds across the Texas territory, a time when dreams were measured in acres and survival counted in breaths. They say the northern frontier takes more than it gives, but they never tell you how it changes what it leaves behind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Wilson never planned to be alone, never expected to hear the echo of her own breathing in the darkness of Copper Creek Mine, where dust and memories were all that remained of men's ambitions. They say, you never hear the bullet that kills. You, Emma Wilson, heard everything, the crack of gunfire, the screams of her family, and worst of all, the silence that followed. But this story isn't about death. It's about what happens when someone refuses to die. The wagon wheels cut deep tracks into the red Texas soil as the Wilson family made their way toward Willow Springs. 5 wagons in total, farmers, craftsmen, dreamers all, led by Emma's father, Daniel, a man whose laugh could drown out a thunderstorm and whose handshake meant more than any written contract. Emma rode in the lead wagon, hair the color of wheat tied back with a blue ribbon, eyes scanning the horizon, not out of fear but wonder. At 22, she carried both her mother's Bible and her grandfather's pistol, faith and protection wrapped in the same bundle. Should see the settlement by sundown tomorrow, Daniel called over his shoulder, maps spread across his knee. New life waiting for us there. Emma nodded, though something in her chest tightened. She'd left a suitor back. In Tennessee, a banker's son with soft hands and ambitious plans, the kind of man her mother approved of. The kind of man who'd never understand why Emma kept a journal full of pressed wildflowers and sketches of birds in flight. "You still thinking about that Hawkins boy?" her father asked, reading her silence like a book he'd memorized. "No," Emma lied, smoothing her skirts. "Just wondering what's waiting for us." What was waiting couldn't have been predicted by even the most weather-worn prophet or doom-speaking preacher. The attack came at dusk, when shadows played tricks and the setting sun painted everything blood-red. Not Indians, as many would later assume, but the Blackwell Gang, outlaws with nothing to lose, and civilization's restraints long abandoned. They came fast, 6 riders emerging from the gully like devils from the earth itself. No demands for money, no warnings, just gunfire and chaos. Emma remembered fragments. Her father pushing her from the wagon. Her mother's scream cut suddenly short, the smell of gunpowder, the copper taste of fear, her legs carrying her through scrub brush, branches tearing at her dress, her lungs burning. And then, the mine, copper. Creek's abandoned entrance, emerging like salvation from the rocky hillside. Emma tumbled inside, deep into darkness as gunshots echoed behind her. She pressed herself against cold stone walls, a hand clamped over her mouth to silence her breathing as hoofbeats thundered nearby, then faded. Time stretched and contracted in the darkness, minutes or hours. She couldn't tell. When she finally found courage to move deeper into the mine, a single match from her pocket revealed rough-hewn tunnels, abandoned tools, and the certainty that she was utterly alone. 20 miles away at Fort Harrison, Captain James Miller slammed his fist against his desk, rattling the tin cup that held more whiskey than coffee. "Another attack? Where?" he demanded. Lieutenant Roberts shifted uncomfortably. "South of Twin Pines Ridge. Traders found the wagons this morning. 5 in total, all burned." "Survivors?" "None that we found, sir." The lieutenant swallowed hard. "Women and children among them." Captain Miller had seen enough death in the war between the states to last 10 lifetimes. Now, assigned to this godforsaken outpost, he was supposed to protect settlers from threats both native and outlaw. His failures outnumbered his successes. "Get me 2 rivers," he ordered, voice like gravel. Thomas Jackson, known as 2 Rivers, for the mixed heritage that flowed in his veins, arrived at the fort an hour later. He stood tall in the captain's office, his military jacket worn over traditional Comanche leggings, his dark eyes revealing nothing. "Another massacre," Miller said without greeting. "Need you to track whoever did it." Two Rivers nodded once. He had played this role before, the tracker, the translator, the man who walked between worlds without belonging fully to either. The army valued his skills but kept him at arm's length. His mother's people viewed him with similar caution. "You think it was Comanche?" Two Rivers asked, his voice quiet but steady. Miller's jaw tightened. "I think I need answers, not assumptions. That's why I'm sending you." Two Rivers accepted his assignment with another slight nod. What choice did he have? This was the bargain he'd made, his service in exchange for protection for what remained of his mother's band. "I'll ride at first light," he said. "You'll ride now," Miller countered. "I've got 5 families of settlers due in next week, and I need to know if they're riding into an ambush." As Two Rivers prepared his horse, Dr. Sarah Bennett approached, medical bag in hand. "Take these," she said, pressing bandages and tinctures into his saddlebag, "just in case." Sarah was new to the fort, a widow who'd trained alongside her physician. Husband before the war took him. Most men dismissed her knowledge. Two Rivers never had. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said quietly. "Being their bloodhound." Two Rivers secured his bedroll before answering. Someone has to read the truth. And if the truth is ugly, truth usually is. He mounted his horse with fluid grace. "Keep coffee hot. I'll be back." The journey to the massacre site took him through terrain he knew well. Rocky hills giving way to stretches of prairie, scattered oak mottes providing rare shade. He traveled light and fast, eyes constantly scanning, reading the land like others read books. The burned wagons appeared on the horizon by mid-afternoon, black scars against the landscape. Two Rivers approached cautiously, though his instincts told him the danger had passed. Death left its own particular silence. What he found was worse than the reports suggested. Not simply robbery, this was rage, hatred turned physical. Bodies lay where they had fallen, now being reclaimed by the earth and sky. Two Rivers dismounted, kneeling beside tracks in the dust, reading the story written there. 6 riders, heavily armed. Not Comanche? Wrong horses, wrong approach. Likely white men based on boot prints and riding style. He moved methodically through the scene, piecing together the attack until he found something unexpected, a single set of smaller footprints running from the lead wagon toward the hills. A survivor. Two Rivers followed the trail as it wound through brush and rocky ground. The footprints belonged to a woman, narrow shoes, running in panic but with purpose. She had been smart, keeping to hard ground where possible, but fear leaves its own trail. The tracks led to Copper Creek Mine, abandoned years ago when the copper veins ran dry. The entrance gaped dark against the hillside. Two Rivers approached slowly, reading more subtle signs now. A single drop of water caught his eye, except it wasn't water. On a rock near the mine entrance, a teardrop, long dried but leaving its mineral trace behind. And another further in, and another. A trail of tears leading into darkness. Two Rivers stood at the threshold, suddenly aware of being caught between duties. Captain Miller wanted the attackers, but here was a different truth. Someone alive, hiding, terrified. He removed his army jacket, letting it fall to the ground. If he entered as a soldier, he would be met as one. Some truths required a different approach. "I know you're in there," he called, his voice echoing slightly. "I'm not here to harm you." Only silence answered. 3 days had passed since Emma Wilson crawled into the abandoned mine. 3 days of darkness broken only by carefully rationed matchlight. 3 days of thirst quenched by water dripping from stone. 3 days of hunger dulled by grief. She had ventured deeper into the mine's labyrinth, finding a small chamber where miners once took their meals. Old crates became her bed, a discarded lantern her companion, though its oil had long since dried up. Her father's pocket watch, pressed into her hand during those final chaos-filled moments, ticked away hours that felt divorced from time itself. Emma had tried venturing out once in pre-dawn darkness. The sight of buzzards circling in the distance had sent her scurrying back into the mine, heart hammering against her ribs. She couldn't face what remained at the wagon site. Couldn't confirm what she already knew in her heart. Instead, she rationed the few biscuits from her pocket, made plans for gathering rainwater, and tried to ignore the realization that she was merely postponing the inevitable. The Texas frontier was no place for a woman alone. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She wrote in her journal by matchlight, not so much for any future reader, but to convince herself she still existed. I don't know if I'm being a coward or sensible. Father would want me to survive. Mother would want me to maintain dignity. In doing so, I find myself talking to them both in the darkness. If this is madness, it's a comfort I'm not ready to surrender. It was during one such writing session that she heard the voice from the mine entrance, a man's voice, neither white nor wholly native in its cadence, calling into the darkness. Emma froze, the match burning down to her fingertips before pain forced her to extinguish it. She pressed herself against the rock wall, breath shallow, the pistol from her bundle now gripped in trembling hands. Footsteps approached, cautious, measured, a slight scrape of leather against stone. Not the heavy boots of the outlaws, but not U.S. cavalry either. I know you survived the wagon attack, the voice came again, closer now. I'm not with the men who did this. Emma remained silent, unconvinced. Deception was as common as dust out here. I'm setting down a canteen of water, the voice continued, and some jerky. I'll back away. You can decide if you're thirsty enough. To trust! The footsteps retreated. Emma counted to 100 before daring to move, her thirst finally overwhelming caution. She crept forward, straining to see in the darkness. Her fingers found the canteen first, real, solid, sloshing with precious water. Beyond it, a small package wrapped in cloth. No obvious trap. Emma retreated with both items to her small chamber, before risking another match. The water tasted sweeter than anything she could remember. The jerky was tough but nourishing. Energy flowed back into her limbs, even as suspicion clouded her thoughts. Whoever you are, she called out finally, voice cracking from disuse. I have a gun, and I know how to use it. A pause, then. If you were going to shoot me, you would have already. Why are you here? Emma demanded. I tracked for Fort Harrison. Found signs of a survivor. A longer pause. You're safe from the men who attacked your wagons. They're long gone. How do I know you're telling the truth? Another silence. You don't. But you can't stay in this mine forever. The stark reality of those words hit Emma like physical pain. He was right. Her supplies, even with his additions, would last days, not weeks. The mine offered temporary shelter, not life. What's your name? She asked, a small concession. Thomas Jackson. Some call me Two Rivers. A mixed blood then. Emma had heard of such men who worked for the army, walking the edge between worlds. Her father had spoken of them with respect rather than the usual suspicion. The people in the wagons, she began, then faltered. I'll help you bury them properly, he answered her unfinished question. When you're ready. Emma closed her eyes, tears sliding down cheeks already tracked with earlier grief. Not the answer she'd hoped for, but the one she'd expected. There's a fort, Two Rivers continued. 20 miles north, doctor there, safety. Safety. The word seemed to belong to another lifetime. But the alternative was this darkness, these stone walls, slow starvation. "I'll come out tomorrow," she said finally. "At dawn. I'll be here." Emma listened as his footsteps retreated, leaving her alone with decisions that seemed impossible. She couldn't trust him, didn't trust anyone after what she'd witnessed, yet survival demanded risk. She curled around her father's watch, letting its steady ticking lull her toward sleep, unaware that outside the mine, Thomas Two Rivers Jackson was making his own difficult choice. He should return to Fort Harrison immediately, report the outlaws' direction of travel, organize a pursuit. Those were his orders. Instead, he made camp near the mine entrance, gathering wood for a small fire that would both warm the night and signal his continued presence to the woman inside. As flames cast dancing shadows across the hillside, Two Rivers considered his pathway forward. He had been sent to find killers, but had found a survivor instead. Captain Miller would be impatient for his return, suspicious of his delay. The woman in the mine clearly came from the settler wagons, likely the only survivor of the Blackwell gang's latest atrocity. Getting her safely to Fort Harrison would mean protection for her, but would also mean returning to his role as the captain's tracker. Each success in that role brought safety for his mother's people, even as it distanced him from them. Two Rivers added another stick to the fire, watching sparks spiral upward to join the stars. He had spent his life navigating between worlds, white and Comanche, military and tribal duty and freedom. This woman's survival complicated matters further. She would need protection beyond what the mine's walls could provide, yet her presence at the fort would raise questions about his delayed return. When dawn broke, painting the hills in gold and shadow, Two Rivers was waiting as promised. He had prepared coffee over a small fire and laid out what remained of his provisions. The mine entrance remained dark and silent long after sunlight reached it. He had begun to wonder if the woman had fled deeper into the tunnels when movement caught his eye. She emerged slowly, one hand holding a pistol at her side, the other shielding eyes unaccustomed to daylight. Her dress was torn and dirt-stained, her face smudged with dust, except where tears had carved clean pathways. But she stood straight, chin lifted, eyes assessing him with intelligence rather than blind fear. "You're him?" she asked. "Two Rivers?" He nodded once, gesturing to the fire. "Coffee's hot." Emma approached cautiously, keeping distance between them as she studied this man, who was neither fully white nor fully Comanche. He wore buckskin leggings and a cotton shirt, his black hair pulled back from features that spoke of heritage from two worlds. No uniform, though something about his posture suggested military training. "Why did you follow me?" she asked, accepting the tin cup he offered, but making no move to drink. "Found your trail. My job is tracking." "For the army?" Not a question. Two Rivers nodded. "Fort Harrison. Captain Miller sent me to find who attacked the wagons." "It wasn't Indians," Emma said quickly. "It was white men, 6 of them. One had a scar across his cheek. Their leader wore a black duster." Two Rivers went still. "Blackwell," he said, the name falling between them like a stone. "You know him?" "Everyone in these parts knows Luther Blackwell. Former Confederate. Now he just kills." Two Rivers poured himself coffee. "How did you escape?" Emma's hand tightened around the cup. "My father. He pushed me from the wagon when the shooting started. Told me to run. I found the mine entrance and hid." She didn't mention the details, how she'd pressed her fist against her mouth to hold back screams as she watched her mother fall. How she'd prayed for courage that never fully arrived, huddled in darkness for days because she couldn't face the aftermath. Two Rivers seemed to understand what remained unspoken. "Fort Harrison is a day's ride north. Safety there." Emma looked. Back at the mine, her refuge, her prison. then toward where the wagon train had been attacked, though hills obscured the view. "I need to bury them first," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "My family." Two Rivers considered her for a long moment, weighing duty against decency. Captain Miller wanted information immediately, but some things couldn't be rushed. "We'll need tools," he said finally. The sun climbed high and merciless as Emma and Two Rivers worked. They had traveled back to the wagon site, Emma fighting nausea as the scene of destruction came into view. The Blackwell gang had been thorough. Wagons burned to blackened frames, possessions scattered across blood-stained earth. Emma moved through the aftermath in a daze, identifying family members with quiet dignity that masked her breaking heart. Two Rivers kept a respectful distance, gathering scattered belongings he thought she might want to keep. A cameo locket, a leather-bound Bible somehow spared by the flames, a wooden hair comb. They buried her family on a small rise overlooking the trail, marking each grave with stones arranged in simple crosses. No names, no dates. Those would live only in Emma's memory now. As Two Rivers dug the final grave, Emma knelt beside the burned remains of the lead wagon, searching for anything that might have survived. A glint of metal caught her eye. Her mother's silver sewing kit, miraculously intact beneath a fallen wagon board. Her fingers closed around it like a talisman. "They took our money," she said, voice hollow, "our clothes, our food, even the good horses. But they left this." She held up the small silver case. "What kind of men do such things?" Two Rivers paused in his digging, leaning on the shovel. "Men who stopped being men long ago." "Is that how you see all white settlers?" The question escaped before Emma could reconsider its bluntness. Two Rivers studied her, his expression unreadable. "I see people as they are, not as what they come from." "And what am I?" she challenged, grief making her bolder than wisdom might advise. "Someone who survived," he said simply. "That makes you worth protecting." The straightforward answer caught Emma off guard. Not pity, not dismissal, just acknowledgement of her continued existence as something valuable. They finished the burials in silence. Emma gathered wildflowers to place on each grave, whispering private goodbyes. Two Rivers stood back, giving her space for grief while keeping watch on the surrounding terrain. The Blackwell gang wouldn't likely return to the scene of their crime, but the Texas frontier harbored many dangers. As sunset approached, Two Rivers built a small fire near the graves. Emma sat with her back against a rock, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "We should reach Fort Harrison by tomorrow evening," Two Rivers said, offering her a cup of coffee. "The doctor there, Dr. Bennett, she'll help you." "She?" Emma looked up in surprise. A ghost of a smile crossed Two Rivers' face. "Yes, Army doesn't officially recognize her as such, but she's a better physician than most I've known." Emma wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "What will happen to me at the fort?" It was the question that had hovered unspoken between them all day. A woman alone on the frontier had limited options, all of them dependent on others' charity. "Captain Miller will arrange transport to the nearest proper settlement once you've recovered," Two Rivers said, though something in his tone suggested uncertainty. "Willow Springs, most likely." "And then what?" Emma pressed. "I have no family left, no money." Two Rivers added another stick to the fire before answering. "People survive. They find ways." "Is that what you did?" The question slipped out unbidden, more personal than she'd intended. Two Rivers went still, and for a moment Emma thought she'd overstepped. But then he nodded slightly. "My father was a cavalry officer. My mother, Comanche. When I was 10, my father was killed in a skirmish. I was sent to a mission school." His words came carefully, as if rarely spoken aloud. "Later, the army discovered I could could speak both languages, made me useful. Between two worlds." Emma said softly. Belonging to neither, he corrected, stirring the fire. You should rest, long ride tomorrow. Emma didn't argue, though sleep seemed impossible with her family's fresh graves just yards away. She wrapped herself in the blanket Two Rivers had provided and lay down, her father's watch clutched in one hand. Sleep eventually came, broken and uneasy. Dreams of gunfire and screams gave way to quieter visions, her mother's hands guiding her own through embroidery stitches, her father's laugh as he taught her to fish in Tennessee streams. She woke to gray pre-dawn light and the smell of coffee. Two Rivers had already saddled his horse and was checking supplies. You didn't sleep, Emma observed, noting the alertness in his movements that suggested night-long vigilance. Wasn't tired, he replied, handing her a tin of beans warmed over the morning fire. Emma accepted the meager breakfast, suddenly aware of her appearance, torn dress, tangled hair, face stained with dirt and dried tears. I must look a fright. Two Rivers paused in his preparations. You look like someone who lived when others didn't. Nothing frightful about that. The simple statement carried more comfort than any conventional reassurance. Emma ate in silence, watching as Two Rivers efficiently broke camp, erasing most signs of their presence. Can you ride? He asked, gesturing to his horse. Emma nodded. She'd grown up around horses in Tennessee, though riding astride rather than side saddle would be a new experience. We'll share the saddle, Two Rivers explained. Slower, but safer. The arrangement required proximity that would have been scandalous in Emma's previous life. Now such concerns seemed trivial against the backdrop of survival. She allowed Two Rivers to help her mount, then settled awkwardly as he swung up behind her. They rode north, leaving the graves and burned wagons behind. Emma didn't look back, couldn't bear to. Instead, she focused on the rhythm of hoofbeats and the unfamiliar sensation of being surrounded by Two Rivers' presence without being touched by him. He maintained a respectful distance despite their shared saddle, his arms reaching around her only to hold the reins. The Texas landscape unfolded before them, rolling hills giving way to stretches of prairie, scattered trees offering occasional shade from the strengthening sun. They rode in silence for the most part, stopping briefly at a creek to rest the horse and drink. Tell me about Fort Harrison, Emma requested as they continued their journey. What should I expect? Small outpost, 30 soldiers, wooden buildings inside a stockade wall. Two Rivers' description was sparse. Captain Miller runs it, strict man, fair mostly. Are there other women? Few. Laundress, Dr. Bennett, some officers' wives. He paused. They'll be curious. About you. Emma understood the warning. She would be an object of fascination, survivor of a massacre found by the half Comanche scout. Gossip would precede her arrival and follow her departure. And you? She asked. What is your place there? Two Rivers was silent so long, Emma thought he might not answer. I track. I translate. I stay separate. The simple explanation held volumes of unspoken experience. Emma didn't press further. By mid-afternoon, they crested a rise that revealed their first view of Fort Harrison in the distance, a square wooden stockade rising from the prairie, American flag visible even at this distance. Two Rivers reined the horse to a stop, giving Emma a moment to prepare herself. Once we cross that threshold, he said quietly, things change. You'll be under the Army's protection. And you? Emma asked, suddenly anxious about the transition. I report to Captain Miller, continue tracking Blackwell. The reality of their imminent separation hit Emma with unexpected force. This man, still largely a stranger, was her only connection to everything that had happened. The only witness to her survival, her grief, her strength. Will I see you again, she asked, the question simpler than the emotions behind it. Two Rivers didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried a rare uncertainty. That depends on choices not yet made. He urged the horse forward, and Fort Harrison grew larger with each hoofbeat. Emma straightened her spine, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face whatever waited behind those wooden walls. Knowing that the mine's darkness and the trail of tears that had led her to this moment were now part of who she was. As the fort's gates opened to receive them, Emma felt Two Rivers' presence behind her like a shield, temporary but vital. Whatever came next would require strength she wasn't sure she possessed. But she had survived when no one expected her to. Perhaps that was enough to start with. Fort Harrison appeared smaller up close than it had from a distance. The wooden stockade walls stood weathered but sturdy, enclosing a collection of practical buildings, barracks, stables, infirmary, and the commander's quarters. As Two Rivers guided his horse through the gates, Emma felt the weight of eyes upon her, curious and assessing. A thin man with sergeant stripes approached as they dismounted. "Jackson," he acknowledged with a curt nod. "Captain's been waiting." His gaze shifted to Emma, taking in her disheveled appearance and torn dress. "This, the survivor?" "Emma Wilson," Two Rivers said simply. "Needs the doctor." The sergeant nodded. "Again. I'll take her to Dr. Bennett. Captain wants you now." Two Rivers turned to Emma, something unspoken passing between them. "You'll be safe here," he said quietly. Emma wanted to reach for him, to ask him to stay with her. This one tenuous connection to all she had lost. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and nodded, summoning dignity from some deep reserve. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for what he had done, "for finding me." Two Rivers held her gaze a moment longer than necessary, then turned away, heading toward the largest building in the compound. Emma watched him go, suddenly aware of how alone she truly was. "This way, ma'am," the sergeant said, not unkindly. "Doc's waiting." The infirmary occupied a small but surprisingly clean building near the eastern wall. Inside, a woman in her 30s looked up from a desk covered with medical texts and ledgers. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and though she wore a simple dress rather than a physician's coat, her bearing suggested authority. "Sergeant Wilson," she acknowledged, then her eyes found Emma. "You must be the survivor." "Emma Wilson," the sergeant supplied. "Found her at Copper Creek Mine. Two Rivers brought her in." Dr. Sarah Bennett approached Emma, her assessing gaze, both professional and compassionate. "Thank you, Sergeant. I'll take it from here." The dismissal was polite, but firm. When the door closed behind him, Dr. Bennett gestured to a chair. "Please sit. You look ready to fall over." Emma sank gratefully into the offered seat, suddenly aware of the bone-deep exhaustion that had been held at bay only by necessity. "When did you last eat properly?" the doctor asked, filling a cup with water from a pitcher. "Before the attack," Emma admitted, accepting the water and drinking deeply. 3, maybe 4 days ago." Dr. Bennett's expression remained neutral, though her eyes registered concern. "I'll have food brought, but first, let me check you for injuries." The examination was thorough, but respectful. Dr. Bennett noted the scrapes and bruises from Emma's flight into the mine, the raw blisters on her feet, the general exhaustion that came from days of fear and inadequate nutrition. "You're remarkably intact, considering," she said finally, applying salve to the worst of the scrapes, "though I suspect the wounds we can't see need more tending than these." Emma looked down at her lap, unexpected tears welling. This simple kindness, another woman's gentle hands and matter-of-fact care, breached defenses that even grief hadn't fully penetrated. "My family," she began, but couldn't continue. Dr. Bennett rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You don't need to speak of it now or ever to me, but when you're ready, know that I've heard many difficult things in this room. Nothing you say will leave these walls." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. A young private entered carrying a tray with bread, soup, and a pot of tea. "Captain's compliments, ma'am," he said to Dr. Bennett, "and he requests the patient's presence when she's able." Dr. Bennett's expression tightened slightly. "Inform the captain that Miss Wilson requires rest. I'll bring her when she's ready." The private hesitated, clearly caught between conflicting authorities. "Ma'am, the captain was quite insistent, said it was urgent." "So is proper medical care," Dr. Bennett replied firmly. "You may tell him I said so." After the private retreated, Dr. Bennett turned back to Emma with a small conspiratorial smile. "Captain Miller and I have an understanding. He commands his soldiers, I command my infirmary." Emma managed a weak smile in return, warmed by this unexpected alliance. "Now eat," the doctor instructed. "Then we'll find you something clean to wear before the inevitable interrogation." The food was simple, but felt like luxury after days of near starvation. As Emma ate, Dr. Bennett busied herself preparing a basin of warm water and laying out a spare dress, plain but clean. "It's one of mine," she explained. "Might be a bit large, but better than what you're wearing." "You're very kind," Emma said, the words inadequate for the gratitude she felt. Dr. Bennett's expression softened. "This frontier takes enough from women, without us withholding kindness from each other." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "2 rivers brought you in. That's unusual." Emma looked up. "How so?" "He typically reports directly to the captain, doesn't bring survivors himself." Dr. Bennett handed Emma a clean cloth for washing. "He's a complicated man in a complicated position." "He saved my life," Emma said simply. "Yes, I imagine he did." Dr. Bennett's tone suggested she understood more than Emma was saying. "I'll give you privacy to change. Rest if you can. I'll hold the captain at bay as long as possible." Alone, Emma washed away days of dirt and dried tears, the warm water, both cleansing and confronting. Each smudge removed revealed the reality of her situation, a woman without family, without means, dependent on the charity of strangers in a harsh land. The borrowed dress hung loose, but felt like armor compared to her torn and filthy clothing. Emma folded her old dress carefully, unwilling to part with this last remnant of her previous life. From its pocket, she retrieved her father's watch and her mother's silver sewing case, touchstones to all she had lost. A small mirror hanging on the wall revealed a face she barely recognized. Thinner, older somehow, eyes haunted by what they had witnessed. Emma smoothed back her hair as best she could without a proper brush, determined to face whatever came next, with whatever dignity remained to her. Dr. Bennett returned an hour later, carrying a tray with more food. "You look better," she observed. "How do you feel?" "Alive," Emma answered truthfully, "though I'm not entirely sure that's a blessing yet." The doctor nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The captain is growing impatient. Are you ready to speak with him? I can accompany you." Emma squared her shoulders. "Yes, thank you." They crossed the compound together, drawing glances from soldiers who quickly looked away when Dr. Bennett fixed them with a stern gaze. The commander's office occupied the ground floor of the largest building, its door guarded by a stone-faced corporal who knocked once before admitting them. Captain James Miller stood as they entered, a courtesy Emma hadn't expected. He was older than she'd imagined, perhaps 50, with a neatly trimmed grey beard and the weathered face of a man who'd spent decades in harsh conditions. The blue uniform he wore was immaculate despite the fort's dusty surroundings. "Miss Wilson," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite his desk. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Bennett." He acknowledged the physician with a nod that suggested a complex history. "Captain," Dr. Bennett replied, "Miss Wilson is still recovering. I trust you'll keep this brief." Miller's mouth tightened slightly, but he nodded. "Of course, please sit." Emma took the offered chair, hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Dr. Bennett remained standing just behind her, a reassuring presence. "First, allow me to express my condolences for your loss," Miller began, his formal tone suggesting the words were routine rather than heartfelt. "The Blackwell gang has been a plague on this territory for too long." "Thank you," Emma replied automatically. "I need to ask you about what you witnessed," Miller continued. "Any details you can provide about the attackers, numbers, appearances, direction of travel would be valuable." Emma swallowed hard, unwilling to revisit the memories, yet knowing the importance of her testimony. There were 6 of them. They came from the east, from a gully near Twin Pines Ridge. Their leader wore a black duster. One had a scar across his face. Miller leaned forward, interest sharpening his gaze. Blackwell himself and his right-hand Sutter. What else? With halting words, Emma recounted what she could remember. Details of horses, weapons, the methodical way the gang had searched the wagons after the killing was done. Each word felt torn from her, painful yet necessary. Miller took notes, occasionally asking for clarification, but otherwise allowing her to speak without interruption. When she finished, he sat back, studying her with new consideration. "You have an excellent memory, Miss Wilson. These details match what we know of Blackwell's operations." "I wish I could forget," Emma said quietly. Miller's expression softened fractionally. "Of course, just one more question. 2 Rivers reported that you hid in Copper Creek Mine. How did you know it was there?" The question carried a subtle weight Emma couldn't interpret. "I didn't. I was running blindly, found the entrance by chance." Miller nodded, making another note. "Fortune favors the brave, it seems." He set down his pen. "Now, as to your situation. We can arrange transport to Willow Springs with the next supply wagon, 3 days from now. In the meantime, you'll stay in the women's quarters adjacent to the infirmary." The clinical efficiency with which he disposed of her future left Emma momentarily speechless. 3 days, then sent to a settlement where she knew no one, had nothing, would be at the mercy of whatever charity might be offered. "And then what becomes of me?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Miller looked genuinely surprised by the question. "There's a missionary couple in Willow Springs. They assist those in unfortunate circumstances. I'm sure arrangements can be made." "I'm not seeking charity, Captain," Emma said, her spine straightening. "I'm seeking a way forward." Miller's expression suggested he was unused to being challenged, particularly by a woman in Emma's position. Before he could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. "Enter," Miller called, irritation evident. 2 Rivers stepped into the office, his expression carefully neutral as he noted Emma's presence. "Captain, my report is ready." Miller nodded. "We'll discuss it shortly." He turned back to Emma. "That will be all for now, Miss Wilson. Dr. Bennett will see to your needs." The dismissal was clear. Emma rose, dignity intact despite the uncertainty churning within. As she and Dr. Bennett moved toward the door, 2 Rivers stepped aside to let them pass. His eyes met Emma's briefly, a silent acknowledgement that carried more meaning than it should have after such short acquaintance. Outside, Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He's already decided my fate." Dr. Bennett led her toward a small building near the infirmary. "Captain Miller sees problems to be solved, not people with needs. But he doesn't have the final say in your life, doesn't he?" Emma asked bitterly. "I have nothing, no family, no money." Dr. Bennett stopped walking, turning to face Emma directly. "Listen to me. I came here as a widow with medical training no one would recognize and a determination no one would accept. 3 years later, I run that infirmary." She gestured toward the building they'd left. "This frontier breaks many, but it makes space for those willing to carve their own place." The conviction in her voice kindled something in Emma, not hope exactly, but possibility. A path not yet visible, but perhaps existing nonetheless. The women's quarters proved to be a small but clean cabin with 4 narrow beds, currently unoccupied. Officers' wives usually stay here when they visit, Dr. Bennett explained. You'll have privacy for now. Thank you, Emma said, meaning it for more than just the lodging, for everything. Rest, Dr. Bennett advised. I'll bring dinner later. Tomorrow will look different, I promise. Alone again, Emma sat on the edge of the narrow bed, holding her father's watch and listening to its steady ticking. The rhythm had always soothed her, a mechanical heartbeat that continued regardless of circumstance. Now it served as reminder that time moved forward, carrying her with it whether she wished to go or not. She must have dozed, for she woke to late afternoon shadows and the sounds of the fort going about its business. Orders being called, horses being tended, the rhythmic pounding of a blacksmith's hammer. Ordinary life continuing while hers remained, suspended between what was and what might be. A soft knock at the door roused her fully. Emma smoothed her borrowed dress and went to answer, expecting Dr. Bennett with the promised meal. Instead, 2 Rivers stood there, still in the same clothes he'd worn on their journey, but somehow more formal in bearing, as if the fort's walls had imposed a different version of himself. "You're settled," he said, his tone making it half question. "As much as possible," Emma replied, uncertain of this visit's purpose. 2 Rivers glanced over his shoulder, then back to her. "Walk with me." The request surprised her, but Emma nodded, following him into the compound. They moved along the inside perimeter of the stockade wall, away from the busier central area where soldiers drilled and worked. "Captain Miller has ordered me to leave tomorrow," 2 Rivers said without preamble. "Track Blackwell north toward the Red River." Emma absorbed this information, unsure why it affected her so strongly. "When will you return?" "When I find him, or determine he's beyond reach." 2 Rivers stopped walking, turning to face her. "Could be weeks." The implication was clear. He would be gone long before she was sent to Willow Springs. This brief, unexpected connection between them would be severed by duty and circumstance. "I see," Emma said, struggling to maintain composure. "Well, I've already thanked you for saving my life, but I'll say it again. Thank you." 2 Rivers studied her face, his expression revealing more than it had during their journey together. "You saved yourself first, found the mine, stayed alive until I tracked you." The acknowledgement of her own role in her survival touched something deep in Emma. Most would have seen only her helplessness, her dependence on rescue. He saw her strength. "What will happen to me in Willow Springs?" she asked, giving voice to her deepest fear. 2 Rivers was silent for a moment. "Missionary couple, they're good people, but they'll see you as someone to be saved, not just from circumstances." "From myself?" Emma asked with a hint of bitterness. "From independence," he corrected. "Women alone make people uncomfortable, especially strong ones." Emma turned away, gazing at the fort's wooden walls. "So I trade one prison for another." 2 Rivers touched her arm lightly, the first deliberate contact he had initiated. "There are other possibilities." Emma turned back to him, hope and wariness mingling in her chest. "Such as?" "Dr. Bennett needs help. She's asked Captain Miller repeatedly for an assistant." Emma blinked in surprise. "I'm not trained in medicine." "You're educated. You can read, write. You survived when others didn't." 2 Rivers' gaze held hers steadily. "That's rare out here." "Why would Captain Miller agree?" Emma asked, not daring to embrace hope too quickly. "He won't at first, but Dr. Bennett is—" 2 Rivers' mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Persistent." Emma considered the possibility, remaining at Fort Harrison, working alongside the doctor, building something from the ruins of her former life. It wasn't what she had planned when leaving Tennessee with her family, but then nothing had gone as planned. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. Why help me further? Two Rivers looked away, his profile strong against the setting sun. Because I understand what it means to belong nowhere, to rebuild from nothing. The simple truth of his words resonated through Emma like the toll of a church bell. This man, caught between worlds, understood her displacement in ways others couldn't. Will you come back? She asked, the question escaping before Prudence could contain it. After you track Blackwell? Two Rivers met her gaze again, something unreadable in his expression. I always return to the fort. It's part of my arrangement with Captain Miller. Not a promise exactly, but perhaps as close to one as he could offer. Emma nodded, accepting the ambiguity of their connection. Neither strangers nor truly friends, bound by circumstances rather than choice. Then I hope to still be here when you do, she said simply. They walked back toward the women's quarters in companionable silence, the fort's routine continuing around them. At her door, Two Rivers paused. One more thing, he said, reaching into a pouch at his belt. Found this at the Wagon site. Thought you might want it. He handed her a small object wrapped in cloth. Emma unwrapped it carefully to find a wooden bird, a tiny carved wren that her father had made for her mother years ago in Tennessee. It had sat on their wagon's dashboard throughout the journey west. How did you know it was important? She asked, voice thick with emotion. It was kept, not used, Two Rivers replied. Those things matter most. Emma closed her fingers around. The carving, this tangible piece of her past, rescued from destruction. Thank you, she whispered, the words inadequate for the gift he'd given her. Two Rivers nodded once, then turned to go. Dawn comes early, he said by way of farewell. Sleep well, Emma Wilson. She watched him walk away, this man who had followed, a trail of tears into darkness, and led her back toward light. Whatever came next, whatever place she might carve for herself in this harsh territory, would be shaped by his belief in her survival. Emma slept deeply that night, dreamless and healing. Morning arrived with the sounds of the fort awakening. The bugler playing reveille, horses being led to water, boots on packed earth. She rose and dressed in Dr. Bennett's borrowed clothes, tucking the wooden wren and her mother's silver sewing case into the pocket. A knock at her door revealed Dr. Bennett bearing a tray with breakfast and, remarkably, a hairbrush. Found this. In my things, the doctor said, handing Emma the brush. Thought you might appreciate it. Thank you, Emma said with genuine gratitude, immediately beginning to work the tangles from her hair. Dr. Bennett set down the tray and took a seat on the adjacent bed. Two Rivers left at first light, she said, watching Emma's reaction carefully. Tracking the Blackwell gang north. Emma kept her expression neutral, though something in her chest tightened at the confirmation. He mentioned he'd be leaving. Did he also mention our conversation about the infirmary? Dr. Bennett asked. Emma's hand stilled. He said you might need help. Need, yes. Afforded, no. Dr. Bennett's direct gaze held both compassion and pragmatism. Captain Miller has denied my requests for an assistant. Says the army can't justify the expense for women's work. Emma resumed brushing, considering her response. Yet you continue to serve here. I'm needed, Dr. Bennett said simply, and I'm stubborn. She paused, studying Emma more intently. Two Rivers seems to think you share that quality. A smile tugged at Emma's lips, despite everything. I survived when I wasn't supposed to. I suppose that requires some stubbornness. Dr. Bennett nodded, approval warming her expression. Precisely why I'd like to propose an arrangement. I need help in the infirmary. You need a purpose, a place. I can teach you basic medical skills, enough to be useful. In return, you'd have lodging, meals, and a small stipend once I convince the captain of your value. The offer hung between them, unexpected and transformative. Not charity, but opportunity. Not salvation, but partnership. Why would you do this for a stranger? Emma asked cautiously. Because I was once in a similar position, Dr. Bennett replied. Widowed, trained but not recognized, facing limited options. Someone took a chance on me. She stood, smoothing her skirts. Besides, Two Rivers rarely misjudges character. If he thinks you're worth helping, that's good enough for me. Emma considered the doctor's words, weighing them against the alternative, being sent to Willow Springs, dependent on missionaries' charity, perhaps eventually pushed into a marriage of convenience for protection rather than connection. Captain Miller has already arranged for me to go to Willow Springs, she said, testing the solidity of Dr. Bennett's proposal. Let me worry about the captain, the doctor replied with surprising confidence. Do we have an agreement? Emma stood, extending her hand formally. We do, thank you, Dr. Bennett. The older woman clasped her hand firmly. Sarah, please, if we're to work together, formality will become tiresome quickly. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah introduced Emma to the infirmary's organization, the basic supplies, the ledgers that track treatments and medications. Emma absorbed it all eagerly, grateful for both the distraction from grief and the concrete steps toward a new purpose. By late afternoon, she had catalogued medical supplies, reorganized a cabinet of linens, and observed Sarah treating a soldier's infected hand, all tasks that required focus rather than expertise. You learn quickly, Sarah observed, as they cleaned instruments together. Have you had any medical training? Only what my mother taught me, Emma replied. Herbal remedies, basic wound care. She was known for her healing skills back in Tennessee. Sarah looked up with new interest. Traditional knowledge is valuable out here, where proper medicine is scarce. We should document what you remember. The suggestion kindled something in Emma, a way to honor her mother's memory by preserving her knowledge. I'd like that, she said softly. Their work was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Miller, his expression suggesting he was not pleased to find Emma already established in the infirmary. Dr. Bennett, he acknowledged stiffly. Miss Wilson, I was informed you've taken up duties here without authorization. Sarah wiped her hands calmly on a clean towel. Miss Wilson is assisting me on a trial basis, Captain. As you've repeatedly denied my requests for proper help, I've been forced to find creative solutions. Miller's jaw tightened. The arrangements for Miss Wilson's transport to Willow Springs have already been made. The wagon leaves day after tomorrow. Then we have 2 days to demonstrate her value here, Sarah replied evenly. Unless you'd prefer I close the infirmary during the hours I need to rest. I believe Army regulations require a medical professional to be available at all times. Emma watched the exchange with a mixture of admiration and anxiety. Sarah Bennett clearly knew how to navigate the captain's authority without directly challenging it, a skill Emma would need to learn if she were to remain at Fort Harrison. Miller's gaze shifted to Emma, assessing, "You have no medical training." "I'm a quick study, Captain," Emma replied, drawing on reserves of confidence she'd thought lost. "And I've nowhere else to be." Something in her direct response seemed to give Miller pause. He studied her more carefully, perhaps seeing beyond the survivor of tragedy to the woman beneath. 2 days, he said finally, then we'll revisit the matter. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Two Rivers sent a message by courier. Blackwell's heading north as we suspected. He's following. The information was clearly meant for Sarah, but Miller's glance at Emma suggested he was aware of some connection between her and the scout. Without waiting for a response, he departed, leaving an awkward silence in his wake. "Well," Sarah said finally, "that went better than expected." Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He still intends to send me away." "Perhaps, but he's considering alternatives now." Sarah returned to organizing supplies. "James Miller is rigid but not unreasonable. Show him your value and he'll recognize it eventually. James? Emma asked, noting the familiar use of the captain's first name. Sarah's hands stilled momentarily. We have history, ancient history. She changed the subject abruptly. Now let me show you how to prepare willow bark tea for pain. We use it constantly here. The following day established a pattern that would become familiar in the weeks ahead. Emma rose early, helping Sarah with morning rounds, changing bandages, distributing medications, recording treatments in the infirmary ledger. The work was challenging but satisfying, requiring both compassion and precision. Fort Harrison's residents gradually adjusted to her presence. Some soldiers nodded respectfully when passing, others maintained cautious distance. The few other women, the laundress, Mrs. Peterson, and a corporal's wife visiting from another post, regarded her with curiosity tempered by sympathy. By the second evening, Emma had assisted with setting a broken arm, learned to prepare 3 different medicinal tinctures, and reorganized the infirmary's modest library of medical texts for easier reference. Sarah seemed pleased with her progress, though she said little directly. As they shared a simple dinner in Sarah's quarters adjacent to the infirmary, the doctor finally addressed what hung between them. Captain Miller came by while you were collecting herbs this afternoon, she said, buttering a piece of cornbread. We discussed your situation. Emma set down her fork, appetite suddenly diminished. And? He's agreed to postpone your departure to Willow Springs, indefinitely. Sarah's expression remained neutral, though her eyes held satisfaction. You're officially assigned as my assistant with quarters and meals provided. The stipend will come later, once your position is formalized. Relief washed through Emma so powerfully she felt momentarily lightheaded. Thank you, she whispered, the words inadequate for what Sarah had accomplished. Don't thank me yet, Sarah cautioned. The work is hard, the hours long, and the recognition minimal. This fort isn't an easy place for a woman making her own way. It's better than the alternatives, Emma said with new conviction, and I'm not afraid of hard work. Sarah studied her thoughtfully. No, I don't imagine you are. She pushed a small wooden box across the table. This is for you. Nothing fancy, but necessary. Emma opened the box to find a simple pin, a red cross on a white background, the symbol worn by medical personnel. I'm not trained, she protested. You're learning, Sarah corrected, and in this territory, that's enough to start. The pin marks you as under my authority and the infirmary's protection. Wear it. Emma pinned it to her borrowed dress, the small weight symbolic of a new identity taking shape. Not just survivor, but healer in training. Not defined by loss, but by purpose found in its aftermath. That night, she wrote in her journal for the first time since before the attack, I am not who I was. That Emma died with her family on the trail to Willow Springs, but perhaps who I am becoming has value too. Dr. Bennett sees something in me worth investing in. 2 rivers saw something worth saving. I must trust their vision until I can fully see it myself. The wooden wren sits on my windowsill now. Mother would approve, I think. Birds don't dwell on broken nests, she used to say. They build new ones and sing again. I'm not ready to sing, but I am building something from scattered pieces. Emma closed the journal and placed it beside her father's watch on the small table beside her bed. Through the window, stars punctured the Texas night with ancient light. Somewhere to the north, 2 rivers tracked the men who had destroyed her family. Somewhere in the future, her path and his might cross again. For now, it was enough to have found solid ground after so much uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new skills to master, new roles to define. Emma Wilson, no longer just survivor, not yet fully transformed. closed her eyes, and slept dreamlessly for the second night since leaving the darkness of Copper Creek Mine. When she woke, purpose awaited. "Then we'll need to be strategic about this," Sarah said, her practical nature asserting itself. "Come with me." They returned to the infirmary, closing the door for privacy. Sarah pulled out a map from her desk drawer, spreading it across the work table. Her finger traced a route northeast from Fort Harrison. Cedar Springs is here, near the territorial border. The mission hospital has a good reputation, better than most frontier facilities. If he's there, he's receiving decent care. Emma studied the map, estimating distances. How would I even get there? That's the first obstacle, Sarah acknowledged. The supply wagon that brought Lancaster is returning east tomorrow. It passes within 20 miles of Cedar Springs. Hope flickered in Emma's chest. Would they allow a passenger? Not without authorization, Sarah said, which means convincing Captain Miller. Emma's hope dimmed. After what happened to my family, he'll never allow me to travel unescorted. Sarah considered this, tapping her finger thoughtfully on the map. Perhaps we don't need to mention your ultimate destination. At Emma's confused look, she continued. There's a settlement here, Riverton. It's on the wagon's route. We could request permission for you to travel there instead. To what purpose? Emma asked. Medical supplies. There are herbs and remedies available there that we can't obtain through army channels. Sarah's eyes gleamed with strategic thinking. I've mentioned this need to the captain before. He's been resistant, but circumstances have changed. What circumstances? Blackwell's men have been defeated. The territory is safer. Sarah straightened. And more importantly, you've proven yourself valuable to this fort. Miller knows it, though he'd never say so directly. Emma considered the plan, its risks and possibilities. And from Riverton, I'd need to find my own way to Cedar Springs. Yes, not simple, but possible. Sarah's expression grew serious. Emma, this is dangerous. The frontier is no place for a woman traveling alone, regardless of how much safer it may temporarily be. I know, Emma said quietly, but I also know what it means to be alone when wounded, to feel abandoned by the world. She touched the small red cross pin at her collar. You've taught me to heal. Let me use what I've learned. Sarah studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Decision made. I'll speak with the captain immediately. Pack what you might need. Medical supplies, personal necessities. Be discreet. Emma spent the next hour in controlled urgency, gathering herbs, bandages, and tinctures that might prove useful for treating a serious wound. Into a small valise went her personal belongings, the journal, her father's watch, her mother's silver, sewing case, and the wooden wren. She changed into her sturdiest dress, now properly fitted after weeks of Sarah's alterations. When Sarah returned, her expression was guardedly optimistic. It's arranged with conditions. You'll travel with the supply wagon only as far as Riverton. You're to purchase specified medical supplies and return with the next eastbound wagon. In 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Emma repeated, calculating distances and possibilities. It should be enough time if you move quickly, and if... Sarah left the sentence unfinished. But Emma understood the unspoken caveat, if Two Rivers still lived. Thank you, Emma said, the words inadequate for what Sarah had done. Don't thank me yet. There's more. Sarah handed her a small leather pouch that clinked with coins. My personal funds, for travel, lodging, whatever you might need. I can't accept this, Emma protested. You can and will, Sarah said firmly. Consider it an investment in both our futures. Two Rivers is valuable to this fort, to the territory, and to you, though neither of you has acknowledged it properly. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. Our acquaintance has been brief. Some connections don't require time to form, Sarah replied with surprising gentleness. Only recognition. The supply wagon departed at dawn the next morning. Emma sat beside the driver, a laconic army corporal named Jenkins, with her valise secured. Beneath the seat and Sarah's instructions memorized. Captain Miller had appeared briefly to reiterate his expectations regarding her return, his manner suggesting he suspected more to her journey than the stated purpose. "Fort Harrison has invested in your development, Miss Wilson," he'd said. "I expect that investment to be honored." "It will be, Captain," Emma had assured him, maintaining steady eye contact. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to prove my continued value." Now, as the fort receded behind them and the Texas landscape unfolded ahead, Emma felt a curious mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. For the first time since the Wagon Massacre, she was moving forward by choice rather than necessity. The journey to Riverton passed without incident. Corporal Jenkins proved a man of few words, but considerate actions, ensuring Emma's comfort during rest stops and maintaining a respectful distance at all times. They traveled from sunrise to sunset each day, making camp alongside the trail each night. On the afternoon of the third day, they crested a low rise to see Riverton spread along the banks of a modest river. A collection of wooden buildings, a church steeple, and scattered homesteads marking civilization carved from wilderness. "We'll stay the night at Thornton's," Jenkins informed her as they approached. "Boarding house at the north end, supply depots next door. You can conduct your business in the morning." Emma nodded, grateful for the information. Sarah had provided a letter of introduction to the town's apothecary, explaining Emma's role at Fort Harrison and the supplies she sought. It would serve as her legitimate reason for being in Riverton, while she gathered information about reaching Cedar Springs. Thornton's boarding house proved surprisingly comfortable. Clean rooms, decent food, and a proprietress whose curiosity about Emma was tempered by genuine hospitality. Over dinner in the common room, Emma carefully introduced the subject of Cedar Springs. "I've heard there's a mission hospital there," she mentioned to Mrs. Thornton. "Do many travelers pass between there and Riverton?" "Some," the older woman replied, pouring coffee. "Traders mostly, occasional army couriers. Why do you ask, dear?" Emma offered the story she and Sarah had prepared. "Dr. Bennett at Fort Harrison is interested in their methods. They've had success with treatments we haven't attempted." Mrs. Thornton nodded. "Dr. Martin runs that hospital. Good man, trained, back east before coming to the territories." She studied Emma more carefully. "You looking to visit?" "If possible," Emma admitted, "though I'm not sure of the way." "Johnston's freight wagon heads that direction day after tomorrow," Mrs. Thornton said, after a moment's consideration. "He carries supplies to the mission monthly. Might take a passenger for the right price." Hope surged in Emma's chest. "Where might I find him to inquire?" "Livery stable most mornings. Big man, red beard, can't miss him." Mrs. Thornton's expression softened. "You be careful though, miss. Frontier's no place for a woman alone, even one with medical training." Emma had heard the warning before, would likely hear it again. Yet the journey felt increasingly necessary, not just for Two Rivers' sake, but for her own. Something unfinished pulled her forward, a connection barely formed, yet somehow essential. The next morning, Emma conducted her official business efficiently, purchasing the medicinal herbs and supplies on Sarah's list from the town apothecary. The man proved knowledgeable and respectful of her position, offering suggestions for additional items that might prove useful at Fort Harrison. With her official duties completed, Emma sought out the livery stable where she found Caleb Johnston exactly as described. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard the color of rust and hands like weathered oak. "Cedar Springs?" he repeated when she inquired about passage. "Heading there day after tomorrow, carrying supplies for the mission." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What business you got there, miss?" Emma decided on a version of the truth. "Medical training. I work with Dr. Bennett at Fort Harrison, and we've heard about the mission hospital's success with certain treatments." Johnston studied her for a long moment, assessing. Army sent you? Not exactly, Emma admitted. This is additional research. Understanding dawned in the freighter's weathered face. Personal interest, then. He named a price for passage that seemed reasonable. Leave at first light. 2 days' journey if weather holds. You'll need your own provisions. Emma agreed to his terms, relief and anxiety mingling in her chest. She was committed now, venturing beyond her instructions into territory both geographical and emotional. The journey to Cedar Springs tested Emma's endurance and resolve. Johnston's wagon traveled rougher trails than the Army supply route, the terrain growing more challenging as they moved northeast. They camped under stars each night, Emma maintaining a careful distance while Johnston respected her privacy with gruff courtesy. On the morning of the second day, as they prepared to depart their campsite, Johnston broke his usual taciturn manner. I heard about a wagon massacre south of Fort Harrison couple months back, he said, adjusting the harness on his team. Only one survivor, they said. Emma's hands stilled on her valise. Yes. Johnston glanced at her, understanding in his eyes. That was you. It wasn't a question, but Emma nodded anyway. Yes. Heard something else too, he continued. About an Army tracker who found the survivor. Half Comanche fella named 2 Rivers. He watched her reaction carefully. That who you're looking for at Cedar Springs? Emma considered denial, then recognized the futility. News travels fast. Only the interesting kind, Johnston replied. They say he took a bullet tracking, the men who attacked your wagons. That's what I've heard as well, Emma said, her voice steady despite the emotion churning beneath. I owe him a debt. Johnston secured the final strap on his team, then turned to face her directly. Folks don't survive gut shots, miss. Not often. I'm aware of the odds, Emma replied. I've treated such wounds. And still you're going. Yes. Johnston nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Then we'd best make good time today. They reached Cedar Springs by mid-afternoon, a settlement smaller than Riverton but more, purposefully arranged around the central mission building and adjacent hospital. The church's white steeple rose against the autumn sky, a beacon of civilization in the wilderness. Johnston drew the wagon to a halt before the mission's storage building. Hospital's there, he said, gesturing to a long, low structure of stone and timber. Mission quarters behind it. Dr. Martin's usually about this time of day. Emma gathered her valise, suddenly uncertain now that her destination was before her. Thank you for bringing me. Johnston regarded her steadily. I'll be loading supplies, then staying the night at Jensen's place in town, heading back toward Riverton tomorrow noon. The unspoken offer was clear. If her mission proved futile, he would transport her back. I appreciate that, Emma said, sincerely, then turned toward the hospital, each step carrying her closer to answers she both craved and feared. The mission hospital's interior surprised her with its cleanliness and order. A central hallway ran the length of the building, with doors opening to small wards on either side. The scent of carbolic soap and herbs reminded Emma of the infirmary at Fort Harrison, though this facility was larger and better equipped. A young woman in a gray dress with a white apron approached. May I help you? Emma straightened her shoulders. I'm looking for Dr. Martin. I'm Emma Wilson, assistant to Dr. Bennett at Fort Harrison. The woman, barely more than a girl, really, nodded. Dr. Martin is with a patient. Would you care to wait in his office? Emma followed her to a small room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a desk covered with medical journals and patient records. The organized chaos reminded her of Sarah's workspace, bringing unexpected comfort. He shouldn't be long, the girl assured her before departing. Alone, Emma studied the room's contents, noting medical texts she recognized from Sarah's collection. and others that were unfamiliar. A diploma on the wall confirmed Dr. Martin's Eastern education, Harvard Medical School, graduated 1866. Post-war training then. She had just returned a medical journal to its shelf when the door opened to admit a tall, slender man with spectacles and a neatly trimmed beard streaked with grey. His white coat bore the stains of recent treatment, though his hands were freshly washed. "Miss Wilson?" he inquired, extending his hand. "I'm Nathan Martin. How may I assist Fort Harrison?" Emma accepted his handshake, noting the strength in his grip and the intelligence in his eyes. "Thank you for seeing me, Doctor. I'm here on a somewhat unofficial capacity." Dr. Martin gestured for her to sit, taking his own seat behind the desk. "Unofficial, yet you identified yourself by your position. Interesting." Emma appreciated his directness. "Dr. Bennett did send me to acquire knowledge of your treatment methods, particularly regarding severe wounds, but my primary purpose is more personal." "I see." Dr. Martin leaned back slightly. "And that purpose would be?" "I'm looking for someone who may be under your care," Emma said. "A tracker named Thomas Jackson. Some call him Two Rivers." The doctor's expression revealed nothing. "May I ask why you're seeking this individual?" Emma had prepared for this question, yet found herself answering with unexpected honesty. "He saved my life when no one else would have. Now I'm hoping to return the favor, if it's not too late." Dr. Martin studied her for a long moment, his gaze assessing yet not unkind. "You've traveled a considerable distance on uncertainty, Miss Wilson." "I have," Emma acknowledged. "Is he here?" A beat of silence stretched between them before Dr. Martin nodded once. "He is. Arrived 2 weeks ago in critical condition. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, significant blood loss, infection already setting in." Emma's medical training allowed her to understand the gravity of this assessment, even as her heart constricted with fear. "And his current status?" "Alive, though that's been in question several times." Dr. Martin removed his spectacles, polishing them with a cloth as he continued. "The bullet tore through his liver. We removed it, drained the infection. He's developed pneumonia since, likely from the extended bed rest." "May I see him?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. Dr. Martin replaced his spectacles, regarding her thoughtfully. "Are you prepared for what you might?" "I'm fine. He's unconscious most of the time, severely weakened." "I've assisted with similar cases," Emma replied, though none had carried the personal weight of this one. "I understand the conditions." The doctor rose, apparently satisfied with her response. "Very well, follow me." He led her down the hallway to a small private room at the far end of the building. "We keep him separated due to the infection risk," Dr. Martin explained, pausing at the door. "The sisters take turns sitting with him, though there's little to do beyond basic care at this point." Emma steeled herself before entering. The room was dim, a single window allowing afternoon light to filter through a thin curtain. A narrow bed occupied the center, its occupant almost unrecognizable at first glance. Two Rivers lay motionless, his normally bronze skin ashen, cheekbones sharp against sunken cheeks. His black hair had been cut short, likely for easier care during fever. Each breath seemed a labor, his chest rising and falling in the irregular pattern Emma recognized from pneumonia cases. She approached slowly, noting the clinical details first. The bandaging visible beneath the thin blanket, the dried herbs hanging near the window to purify the air, the basin of water and cloths for cooling fever. Only when she had catalogued these elements did she allow herself to truly see the man who had followed her tears through darkness. "He hasn't regained full consciousness in 3 days," Dr. Martin said quietly from behind her. "The fever cycles. When it breaks, there are moments of lucidity, then it returns." Emma nodded, her medical training providing framework for emotions too complex to process. "The wound itself?" "Healing, finally." The infection has been the greater challenge. Dr. Martin stepped closer to the bed, lifting the blanket to reveal bandages across Two Rivers' abdomen. We change these twice daily. The drainage has decreased, which is promising. Emma recognized the doctor was speaking to her as a fellow medical professional, a courtesy that steadied her. And the pneumonia symptoms? Worsening, I'm afraid. We've tried steam treatments, herbal infusions, limited success. Emma thought of her mother's remedies, knowledge she had carefully documented in her journal. There may be additional treatments. We could attempt. Dr. Martin looked at her with new interest. You have experience with such cases? Some, and knowledge passed from my mother. Emma met his gaze directly. I'd like to help with his care if you'll permit it. The doctor considered her request, clearly weighing professional protocols against practical needs. You understand there's no guarantee of recovery. I do, Emma said softly, looking again at Two Rivers' still form. But he deserves every chance we can provide. The mission has limited accommodations for visitors, Dr. Martin said after a moment, his tone suggesting he'd reached a decision. But I can arrange a room for you with one of the families in town. Relief washed through Emma. Thank you, Doctor. I won't interfere with your protocols. I only wish to assist. Dr. Martin nodded, apparently satisfied. The next dress changes are at dusk and dawn. You may return then if you wish to observe our methods. He moved toward the door. I'll have Sister Agnes show you to Mrs. Jensen's home. She takes in boarders occasionally. Emma lingered a moment longer beside the bed. Impulsively, she reached for Two Rivers' hand, limp and too warm with fever, but still strong, still present. I found you, she whispered, words for him alone, whether he could hear them or not. I followed your path this time. Mrs. Jensen proved to be a widow in her 50s, who managed a small but comfortable home near the center of Cedar Springs. She accepted Emma with minimal questions, providing a clean room and the promise of meals for a reasonable rate. Medical training, you say? She asked as she showed Emma to her quarters. We don't see many women doctors in these parts. I'm still learning, Emma clarified. Dr. Bennett at Fort Harrison has been teaching me. Mrs. Jensen nodded approvingly. Good to have skills, especially out here. She hesitated at the door. You're here for that Indian scout, aren't you? The one they brought in shot up? News traveled quickly in small settlements. Emma saw no reason to deny it. Yes, he saved my life once. I hope to help save his. Something in Mrs. Jensen's expression softened. Then you'll need your strength. Dinner's at 6. Don't be late. Emma used the hours before returning to the hospital to unpack her valise and review the herbal treatments she had documented from her mother's knowledge. One recipe in particular, a poultice using specific plants native to Tennessee but found also in this region, had proven effective against lung ailments. As dusk approached, she gathered her journal and medical supplies, making her way back to the mission hospital. Dr. Martin was waiting as promised, along with a young assistant he introduced as Samuel, a mission student studying medicine under his guidance. Miss Wilson will be observing and possibly assisting with treatment, Dr. Martin informed the young man. She has medical training from Fort Harrison. Samuel nodded respectfully, though curiosity lingered in his expression. Emma had grown accustomed to such reactions. A woman with medical knowledge remained unusual, especially on the frontier. The wound dressing proceeded methodically. Two Rivers remained unconscious throughout, his breathing labored, skin hot with fever. Emma observed Dr. Martin's technique, efficient yet gentle, clinically precise while maintaining the patient's dignity. The wound itself appeared cleaner than she had feared, though the surrounding skin showed inflammation. The infection is localized now, Dr. Martin explained as he applied fresh bandages. But the pneumonia complicates everything. His body has limited reserves to fight both battles. When the dressing was complete, Emma shared her thoughts on the herbal treatment. My mother used this for severe lung infections, she explained, showing Dr. Martin the recipe in her journal. The ingredients are available here. I gathered some on my journey, but would need more. Dr. Martin studied the journal with professional interest. Interesting combination. Similar to treatments the mission sisters use, but with some additions I haven't seen. He looked up at Emma. You believe this would help? I've seen it work, she replied. And at this point, additional options are valuable, he completed her thought. Very well, Samuel can help you gather what you need tomorrow. For tonight, we continue with steam treatments and fever management. Emma stayed through the evening, taking her turn, applying cool cloths to Two Rivers' forehead while monitoring his breathing. In these quiet hours, performing the simple tasks of care, she finally allowed herself to fully process her journey. The impulsive decision, the distance traveled, the uncertainty that still loomed. She had come because she owed him her life. Yes, but there was more. A connection formed in crisis, a recognition that transcended their brief acquaintance. Something about this man had awakened understanding in her. As if in saving her, he had revealed parts of herself previously unknown. Near midnight, as she bathed his face with cool water, Two Rivers stirred slightly, the first movement she had witnessed. His eyelids fluttered, then opened partially, revealing fever-glazed darkness beneath. Water, Emma called softly to the mission sister dozing in the corner chair. He's waking. The sister, Agnes, Emma recalled, quickly brought a cup with a spoon for offering small sips. Emma lifted Two Rivers' head gently, allowing the sister to administer the water. His lips parted, accepting the moisture, though his gaze remained unfocused. Thomas, Emma said quietly, using his given name for the first time. It's Emma. Emma Wilson. For a brief moment, clarity seemed to sharpen. His gaze, recognition flickered across his features before his eyes drifted closed again, exhaustion reclaiming him. He heard you, Sister Agnes said, returning the cup to the bedside table. That's the most response we've seen in days. Hope kindled in Emma's chest, fragile but persistent. Then we continue, she said, resuming the cool compress on his forehead. For as long as it takes. The next morning brought both challenge and possibility. Emma worked with Samuel gathering the herbs needed for her mother's remedy, then prepared the poultice under Dr. Martin's curious supervision. The doctor, while clearly skeptical of treatments outside his formal training, remained open to additional methods, given the severity of Two Rivers' condition. Apply it warm, Emma explained as she demonstrated the technique. Directly to the chest covered with flannel to hold the heat. Replace every 4 hours. Dr. Martin nodded, the scientist in him noting details for future reference. And the tea as well? When he's conscious enough to swallow safely, Emma confirmed. 3 times daily if possible. They established a routine over the following days. Emma assisting with morning and evening treatments, spending hours by Two Rivers' bedside, monitoring his condition. Between these duties, she observed Dr. Martin's work with other patients, absorbing knowledge to bring back to Fort Harrison as promised. Progress came slowly, measured in small increments, slightly improved breathing, periods of reduced fever, moments of consciousness growing gradually longer. On the 4th day, Two Rivers managed to drink the herbal tea without assistance, his gaze following Emma with growing recognition. You shouldn't be here, he said late that afternoon, his voice raspy from disuse but his words clear. Emma looked up from the medical text she'd been studying in the bedside chair. You're speaking. You should be at the fort, he continued, each word clearly requiring effort. Safe. Emma set aside the book, moving to check his temperature, with the back of her hand against his forehead. Cooler than this morning. Fort Harrison is 20 miles from the nearest hostile anything, she replied. I'd say I'm in more danger from your stubbornness than from the territory. A ghost of a smile touched his cracked lips. How? The single word contained multiple questions. Emma chose to answer the most pressing. I heard you were wounded tracking. Blackwell, Dr. Bennett helped arrange passage. Two Rivers processed this information slowly, fatigue evident in every line of his face. Captain Miller believes I'm in Riverton acquiring medical supplies, Emma admitted, which I did along the way. His eyes closed briefly, either from exhaustion or disbelief. When they opened again, they held a clarity that had been absent for days. Why? Emma considered deflection, a professional explanation about medical duty or repaying debts. Instead, she found herself answering with simple truth. You followed my tears through darkness once, she said quietly. I thought perhaps I could follow yours through this. Two Rivers held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then exhaustion claimed him again, his eyes drifting closed, but his breathing seemed easier, his rest more natural than the fever-induced unconsciousness of previous days. Emma resumed her seat, returning to the medical text, but with attention divided between its pages and the man whose path had crossed hers through tragedy and now, perhaps, toward healing. That evening, Dr. Martin confirmed what Emma had sensed. The pneumonia is receding, he said after examining Two Rivers' lungs. His breathing is clearer, fever reduced. The herbal treatment appears to be helping. And the original wound? Emma asked. Continuing to heal. Infection almost resolved. Dr. Martin regarded her with professional respect. Your journey here may have made the difference, Miss Wilson. Not just the treatment, but perhaps your presence as well. Emma felt warmth rise to her cheeks. I've done nothing extraordinary. On the contrary, the doctor contradicted gently. You've demonstrated exceptional dedication to your patient. That's the foundation of true healing. The next days brought steady improvement. Two Rivers began taking broth and managing short periods of sitting upright, though weakness from his extended illness remained evident. His periods of consciousness lengthened, allowing for brief conversations between rest. Blackwell? He asked. During one such lucid interval, concern evident despite his weakened state. Still at large, according to latest reports, Emma answered honestly. Though his gang is disbanded, most killed in the confrontation at the Red River. Two Rivers nodded slightly, absorbing this information. Not finished then. Your job is to heal now, Emma said firmly. Others can track Blackwell. A shadow crossed his features. My obligation to the army remains. Emma understood then that his service wasn't simply employment, but a complex arrangement, the nature of which he had only hinted at during their journey to Fort Harrison. Protection for his mother's people in exchange for his skills. A bargain, not easily set aside. One battle at a time, she said gently. First you must stand again. That goal came sooner than expected. On the morning of Emma's 10th day in Cedar Springs, she arrived at the hospital to find Two Rivers sitting on the edge of his bed, feet touching the floor for the first time. Since his arrival, Dr. Martin stood nearby, ready to support if necessary. He insisted, the doctor explained, noting Emma's surprised expression. Stubborn patients often recover faster, in my experience. Two Rivers looked up at her, determination evident beneath the exhaustion in his face. Need to regain strength. Emma set down her medical bag, moving to his side. Small steps, she cautioned. Your body is still healing. I know my limits, he replied, then tried to stand. His legs wobbled immediately, muscles weakened from weeks of illness. Emma and Dr. Martin caught him before he could fall, easing him back to sitting. Apparently not, Emma observed dryly, though concern softened her words. Two Rivers' expression showed more frustration than pain. "Tomorrow, then." Dr. Martin exchanged a knowing glance with Emma. "I recognize determination when I see it. We'll try again tomorrow with support." Over the following days, Two Rivers made steady progress, standing longer, walking short distances within his room, gradually rebuilding strength sapped by injury and illness. Emma continued administering her mother's herbal treatments alongside Dr. Martin's conventional methods, the combination proving more effective than either approach alone. 2 weeks after her arrival in Cedar Springs, Emma received a letter forwarded from Riverton. Sarah Bennett's familiar handwriting covered pages. With news from Fort Harrison and a clear warning, Captain Miller was asking questions about her extended absence. Emma read the letter in Mrs. Jensen's kitchen, concern growing with each paragraph. "I may need to arrange return transport soon," she told her hostess. Mrs. Jensen nodded, understanding. "Johnston's wagon comes through again next Tuesday. He could take you back toward Riverton." That afternoon, Emma brought the matter to Two Rivers during their daily walking session. He had progressed to moving slowly down the hospital hallway, one hand on the wall for support, Emma at his side, ready to assist if needed. "Dr. Bennett warns that Captain Miller grows suspicious," she explained. "I should return to Fort Harrison soon." Two Rivers was silent for several steps, conserving energy for both movement and thought. "When?" he asked finally. "Johnston's wagon leaves Tuesday, 4 days from now." Another long silence as they reached the end of the hallway and turned carefully. Two Rivers' breathing remained controlled, though effort showed in his posture. "I'll be ready to travel by then," he said, determination evident in every word. Emma stopped walking, surprise overriding medical caution. "That's far too soon. Your wound is still healing, your strength barely returning." "My obligation to Fort Harrison remains," Two Rivers replied, his gaze meeting hers directly, "and to Captain Miller." "You nearly died," Emma protested. "Dr. Martin would never approve such early travel." "Then I won't ask him," Two Rivers said simply. "I'll inform him." Emma recognized the resolution in his expression, the same determination that had likely kept him alive through injury, infection, and pneumonia. Arguing would prove futile. "At least give yourself until Tuesday," she conceded. "Continue rebuilding. Strength. I'll speak with Johnston about accommodations for an injured traveler." Two Rivers nodded agreement, resuming their slow progress down the hallway. "You didn't have to come," he said after several moments, the words carefully chosen. "But I'm glad you did." The simple acknowledgement warmed Emma more than she cared to admit. "As am I," she replied softly. Dr. Martin reacted as expected to Two Rivers' decision, with professional objection tempered by pragmatic acceptance of his patient's determination. "Medically inadvisable," he pronounced, after examining the healing wound. "Yet I recognize the futility of arguing. If you're determined to travel, we must ensure you're as prepared as possible." The next days passed in careful preparation. Emma worked with Dr. Martin to create a travel kit of necessary medicaments and bandages. Johnston's wagon was outfitted with additional padding and support for the rough journey. Two Rivers focused entirely on building strength, walking farther, each day attempting solid foods, sleeping less during daylight hours. On the evening before departure, Emma found herself alone with Two Rivers in the hospital garden, a small enclosed space where recovering patients could take air and sunshine. He sat on a wooden bench, face tilted toward the setting sun, drinking in warmth and light after weeks confined indoors. Emma joined him, maintaining a proper distance while noting the improvements in his appearance, color returning to his skin, strength evident even in stillness, clarity in his gaze as he turned toward her. "Tomorrow then?" he said simply. "Yes." Emma folded her hands in her lap, suddenly aware of transitions approaching. Return to Fort Harrison, resumption of duties, the shifting of their connection from healer and patient to what remained to be seen. "You saved my life," Two Rivers said quietly, "following a trail most wouldn't have attempted." "As you once did for me," Emma replied. "Different circumstances, same result." Emma met his gaze directly. Life continuing when it might have ended. Two Rivers considered this, the setting sun highlighting the angles of his face. "What happens when we return?" The question contained layers Emma wasn't certain either of them was ready to address. "I continue my work with Dr. Bennett. You recover fully before resuming your duties." "And between us?" The directness of his question surprised her. Emma looked away, watching shadows lengthen across the garden. "I don't know," she admitted. "Frontier life offers limited possibilities for connection. Especially for those who already exist between worlds," Two Rivers added, understanding in his voice. Emma nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She, a survivor carrying ghosts and new purpose. He, a man of mixed heritage serving multiple masters, both transformed by violence and healing, both seeking path and place. "Perhaps we create our own possibilities," she suggested finally, courage finding voice in the garden's growing shadows. "As we've each done before." Two Rivers reached across the space between them, his hand finding hers in a gesture both question and answer. Emma allowed her fingers to fold around his, warm now rather than fever-hot, strong again after weakness. "Perhaps," he agreed, the word carrying promise, despite its uncertainty. They sat in silence as twilight deepened around them, hands joined, futures unwritten but somehow less separate than before. Tomorrow would bring the journey's next phase, return to Fort Harrison, questions and consequences. But in this moment, connection, still fragile, still forming, outweighed all that might come after. Emma Wilson, who had hidden in darkness, when her world collapsed, had followed tears to bring light to another's darkness. Two Rivers, who had tracked a lone survivor through wilderness, had himself been found when most vulnerable. Between them lay a path neither had anticipated, but both now recognized. What would follow remained unwritten, but the trail had been blazed, one teardrop at a time. The year was 1876, when hope and heartbreak rode the same winds across the Texas territory. A time when dreams were measured in acres and survival counted in breaths. They say the northern frontier takes more than it gives, but they never tell you how it changes, what it leaves behind. Emma Wilson never planned to be alone, never expected to hear the echo of her own breathing in the darkness of Copper Creek, mine, where dust and memories were all that remained of men's ambitions. They say you never hear the bullet that kills you. Emma Wilson heard everything, the crack of gunfire, the screams of her family, and worst of all, the silence that followed. But this story isn't about death. It's about what happens when someone refuses to die. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Part 1. A world shattered. The wagon wheels cut deep tracks into the red Texas soil as the Wilson family made their way toward Willow Springs. 5 wagons in total, farmers, craftsmen, dreamers all, led by Emma's father Daniel, a man whose laugh could drown out a thunderstorm and whose handshake meant more than any written contract. Emma rode in the lead wagon, hair the color of wheat, tied back with a blue ribbon, eyes scanning the horizon not out of fear, but wonder. At 22, she carried both her mother's Bible and her grandfather's pistol, faith and protection wrapped in the same bundle. Should see the settlement by sundown tomorrow, Daniel called over his shoulder, map spread across his knee. New life waiting for us there. Emma nodded, though something in her chest tightened. She'd left a suitor back in Tennessee, a banker's son with soft hands and ambitious plans, the kind of man her mother approved of, the kind of man who'd never understand why Emma kept a journal full of pressed wildflowers and sketches of birds in flight. "You still thinking about that Hawkins boy?" her father asked, reading her silence like a book he'd memorized. "No," Emma lied, smoothing her skirts. "Just wondering what's waiting for us." What was waiting couldn't have been predicted by even the most weather-worn prophet or doom-speaking preacher. The attack came at dusk, when shadows played tricks and the setting sun painted everything blood red. Not Indians, as many would later assume, but the Blackwell gang, outlaws with nothing to lose and civilization's restraints long abandoned. They came fast, 6 riders emerging from the gully like devils from the earth itself. No demands for money, no warnings, just gunfire and chaos. Emma remembered fragments. Her father pushing her from the wagon. Her mother's scream cut suddenly short. The smell of gunpowder, the copper taste of fear. Her legs carrying her through scrub brush, branches tearing at her dress, her lungs burning. And then the mine. Copper. Creek's abandoned entrance emerging like salvation from the rocky hillside. Emma tumbled inside, deep into darkness, as gunshots echoed behind her. She pressed herself against cold stone walls, a hand clamped over her mouth to silence her breathing, as hoofbeats thundered nearby, then faded. Time stretched and contracted in the darkness. Minutes or hours, she couldn't tell. When she finally found courage to move deeper into the mine, a single match from her pocket revealed rough-hewn tunnels, abandoned tools, and the certainty that she was utterly alone. 20 miles away at Fort Harrison, Captain James Miller slammed his fist against his desk, rattling the tin cup that held more whiskey than coffee. "Another attack? Where?" he demanded. Lieutenant Roberts shifted uncomfortably. "South of Twin Pines Ridge. Traders found the wagons this morning. 5 in total, all burned." "Survivors?" "None that we found, sir." The lieutenant swallowed hard. "Women and children among them." Captain Miller had seen enough death in the war between the states to last 10 lifetimes. Now, assigned to this God-forsaken outpost, he was supposed to protect settlers from threats both native and outlaw. His failures outnumbered his successes. "Get me 2 rivers," he ordered, voice like gravel. Thomas Jackson, known as 2 Rivers, for the mixed heritage that flowed in his veins, arrived at the fort an hour later. He stood tall in the captain's office, his military jacket worn over traditional Comanche leggings, his dark eyes revealing nothing. "Another massacre," Miller said without greeting. "Need you to track whoever did it." 2 Rivers nodded once. He had played this role before, the tracker, the translator, the man who walked between worlds without belonging fully to either. The army valued his skills, but kept him at arm's length. His mother's people viewed him with similar caution. "You think it was Comanche?" 2 Rivers asked, his voice quiet but steady. Miller's jaw tightened. "I think I need answers, not assumptions. That's why I'm sending you." 2 Rivers accepted his assignment with another slight nod. What choice did he have? This was the bargain he'd made, his service in exchange for protection for what remained of his mother's band. "I'll ride at first light," he said. "You'll ride now," Miller countered. "I've got 5 families of settlers due in next week, and I need to know if they're riding into an ambush." As 2 Rivers prepared his horse, Dr. Sarah Bennett approached, medical bag in hand. "Take these," she said, pressing bandages and tinctures into his saddlebag. "Just in case." Sarah was new to the fort, a widow who'd trained alongside her physician. Husband before the war took him. Most men dismissed her knowledge. 2 Rivers never had. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said quietly. being their bloodhound. Two Rivers secured his bedroll before answering. Someone has to read the truth. And if the truth is ugly, truth usually is. He mounted his horse with fluid grace. Keep coffee hot. I'll be back. The journey to the massacre site took him through terrain he knew well. Rocky hills giving way to stretches of prairie. Scattered oak mottes providing rare shade. He traveled light and fast, eyes constantly scanning, reading the land like others read books. The burned wagons appeared on the horizon by mid-afternoon, black scars against the landscape. Two Rivers approached cautiously, though his instincts told him the danger had passed. Death left its own particular silence. What he found was worse than the report suggested. Not simply robbery, this was rage, hatred turned physical. Bodies lay where they had fallen, now being reclaimed by the earth and sky. Two Rivers dismounted, kneeling beside tracks in the dust, reading the story written there. 6 riders, heavily armed. Not Comanche. Wrong horses, wrong approach. Likely white men based on boot prints and riding style. He moved methodically through the scene, piecing together the attack until he found something unexpected. A single set of smaller footprints running from the lead wagon toward the hills. A survivor. Two Rivers followed the trail as it wound through brush and rocky ground. The footprints belonged to a woman. Narrow shoes, running in panic, but with purpose. She had been smart, keeping to hard ground where possible, but fear leaves its own trail. The tracks led to Copper Creek Mine, abandoned years ago when the copper veins ran dry. The entrance gaped dark against the hillside. Two Rivers approached slowly, reading more subtle signs now. A single drop of water caught his eye, except it wasn't water. On a rock near the mine entrance, a teardrop, long dried but leaving its mineral trace behind. And another further in, and another. A trail of tears leading into darkness. Two Rivers stood at the threshold, suddenly aware of being caught between duties. Captain Miller wanted the attackers, but here was a different truth. Someone alive, hiding, terrified. He removed his army jacket, letting it fall to the ground. If he entered as a soldier, he would be met as one. Some truths required a different approach. "I know you're in there," he called, his voice echoing slightly. "I'm not here to harm you." Only silence answered. Two Rivers left Fort Harrison as promised, riding east with the dawn. Emma watched his departure from the infirmary window, his silhouette growing smaller against the rising sun until distance claimed him entirely. She allowed herself one moment of uncertainty before returning to her duties, the work that had become her anchor after so much loss. The days that followed settled into routine. Emma assisted Sarah with treatments, catalogued supplies, documented her mother's herbal knowledge in a leather-bound book that grew thicker with each entry. The fort's residents had fully accepted her presence now, many preferring her gentle hands for minor injuries and ailments. "You've become indispensable," Sarah remarked one evening as they shared tea in her quarters. "Captain Miller mentioned as much yesterday." Emma looked up in surprise. "The captain said that?" Sarah smiled. "Not in those exact words. Something about satisfactory investment and unexpected aptitude. High praise from James Miller." The acknowledgement brought quiet satisfaction. Emma had built something here, purpose formed from tragedy, skills honed through necessity. Yet beneath this contentment ran current of anticipation. Awareness of Two Rivers' absence, like background note in music only she could hear. "Any word from the eastern settlements?" she asked, attempting casualness. Sarah's knowing gaze suggested the attempt had failed. "Not yet, but winter comes slowly this year. He'll have time." 6 weeks passed. The first frost dusted Fort Harrison's parade ground, morning ice forming on water barrels, breath visible in the dawn light. Emma had begun preparing winter remedies: cough, Syrups, warming balms, medicinal teas stored in glass jars that lined the infirmary's shelves. She was labeling the last of these when Captain Miller appeared at the infirmary door. His expression, always composed, revealed nothing of his purpose. "Miss Wilson," he acknowledged with a nod. "A word." Emma set aside her work, apprehension rising. The captain rarely sought her directly unless accompanying an injured soldier. "Of course, Captain." Miller closed the door, unusual precaution that heightened her concern. "We've received word from Settlers Creek Settlement." He paused, studying her reaction. "Two Rivers was there 3 weeks ago, left heading north toward Blackstone Ridge." Emma maintained outward calm despite the implications. Two Rivers should have been returning by now, not traveling further from Fort Harrison. "I see. Is there concern?" "Blackstone Ridge is Blackwell territory," Miller said simply. Two Rivers was aware of this. Understanding dawned with cold clarity. He had found Blackwell's trail and chosen to follow it. Justice or vengeance for the massacred wagon train, for her family. "You believe he pursued Blackwell deliberately," she stated, rather than asked. Miller's gaze sharpened. "I believe he made a choice beyond his assigned duties, a personal choice." The emphasis carried meaning beyond words, acknowledgement of motivations not recorded in official reports. The captain knew, or at least suspected, the connection between his tracker and the Wagon Massacre's sole survivor. "Was anyone sent after him?" Emma asked, professional tone masking personal concern. "Cavalry patrol from Fort Sill is searching the area. Winter's coming if he's out there." Miller left the sentence unfinished, the implications clear. Two Rivers, still recovering from serious injury, faced not only Blackwell, but the territory's harshest season. Emma nodded, absorbing this information with outward composure, while her mind calculated possibilities, distances, risks. "Thank you for informing me, Captain." Miller studied her a moment longer. "Dr. Bennett speaks highly of your judgment. Miss Wilson, I trust that quality extends to all areas." The statement carried both warning and permission, boundaries defined alongside recognition of stakes beyond military concerns. Without another word, Miller departed, leaving Emma with knowledge that demanded response, yet offered no clear path forward. That evening, Emma sought Sarah in her quarters, the need for counsel overriding hesitation. She found the doctor reading by lamplight, medical journal open on her desk. "He went after Blackwell," Emma said without preamble. "Captain Miller just told me." Sarah closed her book, expression unsurprised. "I heard the report came in." "Sit down, Emma." Emma remained standing, tension vibrating through her frame. "He's still recovering, winter's approaching, and Blackwell's gang was mostly destroyed at the Red River," Sarah interjected calmly. "Two Rivers is an experienced tracker who knows the territory better than anyone at this fort. He's also a man who nearly died from infection and pneumonia 2 months ago," Emma countered. "His strength isn't fully restored." Sarah regarded her thoughtfully. "What are you considering, Emma?" The question demanded honesty she had barely acknowledged to herself. "I don't know," she said finally, sinking into the chair opposite Sarah. "But I can't simply wait here while he—" She couldn't complete the sentence. "While he risks his life pursuing the men who murdered your family," Sarah finished gently. "The men he was already tracking when you first met." Emma looked up, meeting her mentor's understanding gaze. "Yes," Sarah sighed, leaning back in her chair. "There's a monthly supply wagon leaving for Fort Sill tomorrow, 3-day journey in good weather." She held up a hand before Emma could respond. "I'm not suggesting you go. I'm providing information, nothing more." The implications hung between them. Possibility without direct encouragement, knowledge without explicit permission. Sarah wouldn't Stop her, but neither would she bear responsibility for what might follow. "I understand," Emma said quietly. "Do you?" Sarah leaned forward, suddenly earnest. "This isn't Cedar Springs, Emma. Blackstone Ridge in winter is treacherous, even without Blackwell's presence. If you're considering what I think you are, understand the risks fully." Emma nodded, appreciation for Sarah's directness tempering her anxiety. "I do, but I also understand what it means to be alone when everyone expects you to die." Sarah studied her for a long moment, then rose and moved to a small chest in the corner. From it, she withdrew a folded map and a small revolver. The map shows trails between Fort Sill and Blackstone Ridge. The gun is self-explanatory. She placed both on the table between them. "I've never given you either of these things. We've never had this conversation." Emma accepted both items, recognition of boundaries Sarah established for both their protection. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Sarah replied grimly. "Just come back alive, both of you." Dawn found Emma among supply crates in the wagon, bound for Fort Sill. Spare uniform jacket, borrowed from the laundry, providing disguise sufficient for casual observation. The driver, a corporal named Matthews, who knew her only by sight, accepted. Her presence with minimal explanation about medical supplies needed at the northern fort. The journey passed in anxious calculation. Emma reviewed the map repeatedly, memorizing landmarks between Fort Sill and Blackstone Ridge. She inventoried her medical supplies, prepared for wounds, exposure, whatever condition she might find when she located 2 rivers. Fort Sill appeared on the 3rd day, larger than Fort Harrison and bustling with military activity. Emma slipped away from the supply wagon during unloading, avoiding official notice while seeking information about patrols searching for 2 rivers. Luck arrived in unexpected form. A young lieutenant named Hayes, who had briefly served at Fort Harrison and recognized Emma despite her disguise. "Miss Wilson," he questioned, finding her near the stables. "What brings you to Fort Sill?" Emma made quick assessment. Hayes had seemed decent during his time at Harrison, respectful of both her and Sarah's positions, risk balanced against need for information. "Lieutenant, I'm seeking news about Thomas Jackson, 2 rivers. He was tracking north of here." Hayes's expression shifted to concern. "The scout from Harrison? Patrol returned yesterday. Found signs of confrontation near Blackstone Ridge. Blackwell's camp was abandoned, but there was blood. No bodies." Emma's heart constricted painfully. "Did they search the area? 2 rivers might be wounded." "Storm forced them back," Hayes replied. "Captain ordered full patrol to return when weather clears, but that could be days. Days 2 rivers might not have if injured in the wilderness with winter closing in." Emma made her decision without further debate. "I need a horse, Lieutenant, and directions to where the patrol found the blood." Hayes stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "You can't be serious." "There's a storm. Every moment counts," Emma interrupted, determination overriding propriety. 2 rivers saved my life once. I won't abandon him now." Something in her expression must have conveyed the futility of argument. Hayes hesitated, then nodded once. "Wait here." He returned with a sturdy bay mare, saddlebags containing provisions, and a detailed description of the patrol's route. "Follow the eastern trail until you reach Split Rock Formation, then northwest toward the ridge. But Miss Wilson, if the storm worsens, turn back. No one survives Blackstone in blizzard conditions." Emma mounted with practiced ease, grateful for riding skills learned in Tennessee that had served her well in Texas territory. "Thank you, Lieutenant." Hayes stepped back, concern evident in his expression. "God go with you. You'll need his help out there." The journey north tested every ounce of Emma's determination. Wind grew steadily stronger, carrying bite of approaching winter. The landscape became increasingly rugged, pine forests giving way to rocky terrain as she approached Blackstone Ridge. a jagged uplift visible even through gathering clouds. She reached the split rock formation by mid-afternoon, turning northwest as instructed. The patrol's tracks had been mostly erased by wind, but occasional signs remained visible to eyes trained through necessity to read subtle markers. As daylight began fading, snow started falling, gentle at first, then increasing steadily. Emma pressed forward, anxiety growing with the worsening conditions. If she couldn't find Two Rivers before dark, the chances of either of them surviving. The night diminished dramatically. The blood sign came suddenly. Rusty smears on rocks beside a clearing that showed signs of recent camp. Emma dismounted, examining the area with growing dread. The amount of blood suggested serious injury. Boot prints led away from the clearing toward a stand of pines to the north. Following these tracks, Emma moved deeper into the trees, calling Two Rivers' name despite risk of drawing unwanted attention. Snow fell heavier now, visibility reduced to ghostly shapes between pine trunks. The small cabin appeared like mirage against white backdrop, abandoned hunter's shelter nearly reclaimed by wilderness. No smoke rose from the crude chimney. No light showed through the single window, but the door stood partially open. Recent use rather than long abandonment. Emma approached cautiously, Sarah's revolver drawn more for reassurance than practical protection. "Two Rivers," she called, pushing the door wider. Interior darkness gave way gradually to shapes as her eyes adjusted. A figure lay on crude pallet against the far wall, unmoving beneath blanket that might have been army issue once. Emma rushed forward, heart pounding against her ribs. Two Rivers lay pale and still, blood-stained bandage visible on his upper chest near the shoulder. His breathing came shallow but steady, alive despite wound and cold that had nearly claimed him. "Thomas," she said urgently, using his given name without hesitation now. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids flickered, then opened slowly. Recognition dawned gradually, followed by disbelief. "Emma?" The word emerged as whisper, confusion evident in his expression. "How followed you?" she replied simply, already unpacking. "Medical supplies." Again. Understanding passed across his features, followed by ghost of smile despite obvious pain. Becoming habit. Emma worked quickly, examining the gunshot wound in his shoulder. The bullet had passed through cleanly, but blood loss and exposure had taken serious toll. Infection threatened, but hadn't yet established foothold. Small mercy. In dire circumstances. "Blackwell," she asked as she cleaned and redressed the wound. "Dead." Two Rivers' voice strengthened slightly. "Exchanged shots. He fell into ravine." Justice or vengeance completed then. Emma felt no satisfaction at the news, only gratitude that Two Rivers had survived the encounter. Barely. His pursuit of Blackwell had nearly cost him life, barely reclaimed from previous wounds. "You shouldn't have followed him alone," she said, professional tone masking deeper emotions. "You shouldn't have followed me," he countered, eyes holding hers despite weakness. Yet, here you are. The simple truth hung between them. Both had made choices beyond reason, beyond safety, beyond what others would consider sensible. Something stronger than duty or obligation had guided their paths to this isolated cabin as snow erased the world outside. "We need heat," Emma said, practicality asserting itself. The storms worsening. Working methodically, she gathered scattered firewood near the crude hearth, grateful for matches in her medical kit. The fire caught slowly, building from spark to steady flame that pushed back darkness and bitter cold. With immediate medical needs addressed and warmth growing, Emma tended to her horse, bringing the mare into the cabin's minimal shelter. The animal's body heat would provide additional warmth through what promised to be dangerous night. Outside, snow fell in earnest now, thick curtains of white obscuring all but the closest trees. They were trapped until the storm passed, isolated from both danger and assistance. Emma returned to Two Rivers' side, offering water and medicinal tea she'd prepared over the small fire. His color had improved slightly, awareness sharpening with treatment and warmth. Fort Sill will send patrol when weather clears, she informed. Him helping him drink. Lieutenant Hayes knows approximate location. Two Rivers studied her face in firelight. You risked everything, he observed quietly. Why? The question demanded truth Emma had acknowledged only to herself. Here, isolated from the world's constraints and judgments, she found courage to voice it. Because some connections form in darkness, yet persist in light, she said, echoing his words from Cedar Springs. Because paths cross for reasons beyond understanding. Two Rivers reached for her hand, grip stronger than she expected given his condition. I followed your tears once, he said softly. You've now followed my blood twice. There's meaning in that. Emma's fingers closed around his, acknowledgement of truth that transcended their separate worlds and conventional boundaries. There is. They remained thus as night deepened outside and fire crackled in the crude hearth. Two souls who had found each other through tragedy, healing, and deliberate choice. What awaited them beyond this storm remained uncertain, but one truth had crystallized. Their paths had merged through tears and blood into single journey. Neither would walk alone again. Morning would bring clearing skies, rescue patrol, return to Fort Harrison, and explanations Captain Miller might accept. The future would bring challenges neither could fully anticipate. But in this moment, connection forged through darkest circumstances illuminated possibility beyond mere survival. The trail of teardrops had led to something neither had expected to find in the harsh Texas territory. Not just life, continuing when it might have ended, but life transformed through recognition of what truly matters when everything else falls away. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.